Will blockchain transform every industry? Chapter 1. The Ledger at the Door. The question arrives like a knock you can feel through the bones of the house. Will blockchain transform every industry? Before you reach for an easy yes or a hard no, listen to the sound of the knock itself, patient, persistent, and a little strange. It does not arrive alone. It carries with it a language of blocks and chains, hashes and keys, miners and validators, tokens and ledgers. It carries with it believers promising a world without middlemen and critics warning of castles in the cloud. And it carries with it, above all, a proposition so deceptively simple that nearly every argument about it swirls around the wrong target. If we could make truth about transactions a property of the network rather than a promise from an intermediary, what doors would open? Which doors would remain shut? Let us step into the foyer of this idea, wipe our feet, and look around. A ledger is an old invention. For millennia we have written who owes whom, who owns what, when something moved from here to there, when a promise was made, and when it was kept. The ledger is civilization's memory, fallible, biased, negotiable, and amendable by power. We all know what it feels like to be outside that memory, to be told we were never owed, that the warranty was never issued, that our vote was not counted, that the payment never arrived. Trust is expensive. We pay for it with banks and brokers, courts and clerks, auditors and agencies. Their work keeps our world livable, but their weaknesses, the fees and frictions, the delays and gates, are the shy cracks through which an entirely new species of ledger can grow. Blockchain is a ledger that refuses to forget and refuses to be one person's. It is a ledger that every participant owns and no participant controls. It is a machine for making agreement in public. It is slow by design compared to centralized systems, and proud of it because perfect speed is not its purpose. Its purpose is consensus with integrity, an agreement that can be verified not by taking anyone's word, but by inspecting the mathematics stitched into the record. If we start here, the knock on the door becomes less mysterious. Industries are not simply collections of products. They are collections of agreements about property, about identity, about provenance, about access, about risk. Transformation follows wherever the cost and friction of agreement is high. It arrives last where agreement is cheap and trust is already abundant. Picture the first hallway in this house, finance. The hallway is crowded, loud, and already wired for the future. In one corner, traditional payment networks fling bits at light speed while charging percentages for the privilege. In another, cross-border remittances drag their feet through corridors of correspondent banks. At the end, a vault opens only for certain passports, certain hours, certain histories. Here, a blockchain is not a theory. It is a blunt instrument. It says, transfer value by writing to a ledger anyone can verify. It allows a small company in Lagos to receive payment from a buyer in Lisbon without 3 banks nodding in sequence. It allows a treasury desk in Manila to settle without waiting out weekend silences. It allows a stranger who cannot sit in your bank branch to still prove ownership of an asset and exchange it. Costs fall when the toll booths shrink. Risks fall when we can audit the road beneath our feet. Not every corridor in finance wants this. High-frequency trading lives by microseconds unavailable to blockchains that wait for consensus. Retail banking thrives on relationships and compliance responsibilities that no chain can outsource. Yet certain doors keep opening. Programmable money with conditions that execute automatically. Tokenized shares that settle in minutes rather than days. Credit markets that price collateral transparently. Identity credentials that reveal just enough and no more. In finance, the knock grows louder. The door opens in parts. Walk with me to the second hallway. Supply chains. This corridor smells of cardboard and ocean air, of ink and adhesive, and the oil of large machines. Boxes move, containers stack, barcodes chatter in their thin electronic voices. And everywhere, there are gap silos held by manufacturers, shippers, ports, regulators, retailers. The ledger, which in finance moves money, here moves claims. I made this part. I loaded this crate. I kept this cargo refrigerated. I inspected this pallet. I delivered this to your dock. The cost is not the metal and fuel alone, but the pen signing and document chasing, the errors stitched into every retype, the corruption that seeps through opaque segments. Now, imagine each step in that chain recording its claim to a shared ledger. Not every claim can be trusted. Some must be verified by censors, others by auditors. But the ledger makes falsification expensive and collaboration cheaper. A grocery chain can scan a lot number and see in minutes when and where the lettuce visited the world, when the temperature spiked, which farm's morning created the afternoon's recall. Insurance policies change their premiums automatically when the temperature falls out of spec. Ports clear containers faster because customs sees what shippers, carriers, and importers see. Traceability stops being a marketing word and becomes a property you can compute. Will blockchain transform every supply chain? No, sometimes a single factory with vertically integrated logistics does not need a shared truth, it needs speed. But where coordination stretches across firms and borders, the shared ledger offers something no private database can: a common ground that no one secretly reshapes. In the third hallway, healthcare, the ledger grows quiet. Here we are not moving boxes or money. We are moving the vulnerable truth of living bodies. Electronic medical records already exist and already frustrate clinicians and patients alike. A blockchain does not make a nurse's night easier by itself, but step carefully into the rooms where consent, provenance, and access are the friction points. A patient wants to share their history with a specialist for a day and withdraw it the moment the visit is over. A researcher wants to prove that a data set was not tampered with between trial phases. A lab wants to timestamp a result without exposing identities. A hospital consortium wants to audit drug provenance from manufacturer to bedside. In each case, the question is not, can we store all health data on-chain? We cannot and should not, but can we anchor proofs on a ledger to make off-chain processes honest? Yes, the transformation, if it comes, will look less like a new database and more like a new grammar for permission and proof. Some rooms are noisy with new experiments. Energy markets build microgrids, where houses sell excess solar power to their neighbors, and the settlement is encoded in a local ledger. The meter becomes a mouth that speaks truth to the market. In art, non-fungible tokens born in euphoria and baptized in fraud are maturing into programmable certificates of authenticity, provenance trails that outlive galleries and platforms. In government, land registries anchor deeds to tamper-evident logs. Public procurement publishes bids and awards in a way citizens can audit. Voting pilots test verifiable tallies whose transparency must be balanced against coercion risks. In identity, self-sovereign frameworks let a student hold a diploma as a cryptographic credential in their wallet and share a signature that says, "I graduated," without revealing the transcript. In gaming, items can persist across titles and trades. Players can own their worlds rather than rent them from servers that vanish when a company's fortunes turn. We return to the foyer because every new passage risks turning us into tour guides of hype. The house of Every industry transformed is a mansion with illusions. We must ask better questions. First, does this industry struggle with multi-party agreement where no single party should own the database? Banks compete, but they share a market. Ports compete, but they share oceans. Hospitals compete, but they share patients. When the answer is yes, the ledger offers a neutral ground to compute trust. When the answer is no, when a single firm runs the entire show and the problem is speed, not trust, the ledger is a slower wheel asked to be a faster one. Second, are tamper evidence and verifiable provenance mission critical? It matters for food safety, drug supply, high-value art, conflict minerals. It matters less for your grocery list or your private notes. A blockchain is a commitment device. It makes lying publicly expensive. If you do not face liars, you do not need it. Third, can incentives be redesigned so that independent actors want to maintain the network honestly? This is the hardest and most human question. Markets fail even with beautiful technology. We must build the tokenomics and governance with empathy for greed and fear, exit and voice, tragedy and coordination. Let us confront the counter-arguments in their strongest form. Blockchains are slow. Yes, the better question is, slow compared to what requirement? For payments at a coffee shop, Visa outpaces any public chain today. For settlements that took 2 days, a chain that settles in minutes is a revolution disguised as patience. For asset networks that must be globally verifiable, a little slowness is not a bug, it is ballast against fraud. Blockchains waste energy. Some do. Proof of work is a cathedral of security that burns electricity to defend itself, and the world should be honest about that cost. But the world also learned, and most modern networks secure themselves with proof of stake or other mechanisms whose energy use approximates traditional server farms. The question becomes relative. Does the ledger's energy cost produce coordination gains that remove trucks of paper, remove days of idling cargo, remove rooms of auditors duplicating work? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It is our responsibility to measure. Blockchains are havens for scams. They can be. New markets attract wolves. Anonymity attracts masks. But so did the early internet. We did not dismantle email because of phishing. We built filters and law, education and norms. The response here is governance. Regulation that is surgical rather than blunt. Identity tools that preserve privacy while revealing enough for compliance, and platforms that design for safety. Blockchains are complicated. They are. But ordinary people do not need to understand elliptic curves to use them any more than they need to understand packet switching to use video calls. The work ahead is an experience layer that makes keys and wallets, signatures and proofs as natural as tapping a card today. The better design we create, the more invisible the chain becomes, fading into the furniture like the best architecture does. Nothing about this is automatic. Transformation is not a law. It is a contested evolution. Some bodies will reject the transplant, others will absorb it and heal faster than we thought possible. Let me tell you a small story. A coffee cooperative in the Highlands decides to trace its harvest. For years, buyers have paid a premium for single-origin beans, but the farmers see little of it. Middlemen certify, and trust is outsourced to glossy stickers. The cooperative partners with a roaster and a logistics firm to record each batch on a shared ledger. At the collection point, each sack receives a QR code, the weight is logged, the farm's anonymized ID is attached. Satellite data about rainfall and a sensor reading for moisture are hashed and anchored as well. As the sacks travel, each handoff writes a new block. Truck to warehouse, warehouse to port, port to ship, ship to port, port to roaster. When the roaster sells to cafes in the city, the point of sale prints a receipt that includes a link to the batch's journey. Customers scan. They see maps and timestamps, photos of the fields, a certificate that can be verified directly on the ledger without calling anyone. Do sales increase? A bit. But the real transformation is upstream. The roaster agrees to a contract that automatically releases a premium to farmers when moisture and quality scores exceed a threshold, and the trigger is a proof on the ledger, not a promise in an email. The cooperative can take that predictable cash flow to a local lender who lends at lower rates because the default risk is reduced by transparent, enforceable agreements. The farmer buys better equipment. Next season's quality improves. The ledger did not make the beans taste better. It made honesty cheaper. Now the skeptic raises a hand. Wouldn't a regular database do the same? Sometimes, yes. If a single company ran this entire chain, perhaps a private ledger or database would suffice. But the cooperative, the roaster, the logistics company, the lender, the cafe, they do not want any one of them to own the database. They want shared truth with shared governance. That is where a blockchain earns its keep. A second story, shorter and sharper. A municipal bus system experiments with dynamic fares. Instead of static tickets and complicated passes, the city introduces a wallet where commuting students hold a credential issued by the university. Low-income residents hold a credential issued by the Social Services Department. The elderly hold another. None of these credentials reveal identities. They merely prove property: student, eligible, senior. At the fare gate, the wallet signs a transaction to a city-run ledger. The gate validates the credential without contacting the issuer. The fare is discounted automatically by the rules encoded in a smart contract that the city council debated and published. Auditors and citizens can inspect the contract publicly. Changing the policy requires a recorded vote and an upgrade process that leaves an indelible trail. Is this transformation? It is not glamorous. It is not a token sale that doubles overnight. It is a governance upgrade with less opportunity for quiet favoritism. It is a mechanism that makes the rules legible to the people they rule. It is, in its modest way, a democratic act. What about industries that will not be transformed? Tell the truth. Many will not. Restaurants do not become better by writing to a blockchain. They become better by seasoning and hospitality. A hair salon does not need a distributed ledger to stock its shampoo. A small design studio does not need to notarize its every brush stroke. They may use payments rails improved by blockchains beneath the surface, but their craft is not a consensus problem. There is wisdom in leaving some doors closed. Here is a litmus test you can keep in your pocket like a key. Ask of any industry. Where do multiple organizations need to compute on shared data but do not fully trust one another to maintain it? If you can name a few, the door is ajar. Where are the costs of reconciliation, auditing, and settlement so high that a slower, more transparent base layer would actually speed the system end to end? If the answer is, every quarter we lose days to close the books, the door creaks. Where does provable provenance of assets, physical or digital, drive safety, compliance, or value? If it does, the door opens wider. Where can we encode public rules as code without undermining rights or accountability? If governance is part of the product, the threshold invites you inside. Where would failure or capture of a central operator be catastrophic or politically unacceptable? If you fear the single point of failure, the latch slides. When enough answers say yes, the ledger at the door is not a fad. It is an invitation, and yet, walk carefully. There are rugs to trip on. Interoperability. Today's networks are islands. Their bridges are narrow and rickety. If your industry adopts one chain and your partners adopt another, your shared truth bifurcates. Standards are coming slowly, painfully, but until they mature, choose architectures that treat the ledger as an anchor and keep application logic flexible. Choose open standards where possible, because your future self will thank you when migration becomes a chapter you can write instead of a courtroom you must survive. Privacy. A public ledger with perfect transparency is a gift to auditors and a nightmare to competitors and citizens. The answer is not secrecy but selective disclosure, zero-knowledge proofs, confidential transactions, the cryptographic art of proving without revealing. These are not magic. They are engineering. They add complexity. They demand care. Keys and custody. In a blockchain world, your key is your kingdom. Lose it, and your assets freeze forever. Leak it, and your assets flee forever. The industry is inventing better safes, multi-signature wallets, social recovery, hardware enclaves, but user experience will decide who enters. If you ask everyday people to hold the world's most precious secret on a phone that falls into a taxi once a decade, you must design as if taxis are predators. Regulation. The law is a slow language. It does not bend to suit any single technology. It demands translation. Some industries will wait on the sidelines until regulators bless a certain pattern. Others will push forward and ask forgiveness later. The wise path is collaboration. Invite the city planner into the room where you design the bus fare contract. Invite the financial authority when you design tokenized bonds. Show your math. Publish your intentions. Create compliance that is verifiable, not performative. Finally, culture. No ledger fixes incentives that refuse to be fixed. If a consortium cannot agree on goals, a shared database will inherit the disagreement. If partners resent each other, they will sabotage the chain or sabotage the governance. Technology can make cheating harder. It cannot make collaboration desirable. You must begin with the human map. The door does not open by promising it will. It opens when the hinges align. A business problem of shared truth. A technical pattern that ensures integrity. A governance design that distributes power. A regulatory context that tolerates experimentation. A culture that genuinely wants to agree in public. You can hear the early rooms where this has already happened. In finance, fast settlement glides beneath your feet even when you never touch a wallet. In logistics, provenance dashboards are replacing phone calls. In digital art, provenance has survived platforms that died. In identity, credentials are signed by institutions and carried by individuals. In energy, microgrids are proving their neighborhoods capable. In each, the knock sounded, the latch turned, and the door opened just enough for light to spill through. Every industry. The word every is unruly. It hides the differences that matter. A paper mill and a port, a film studio and a fishery, a hospital and a hedge fund, each organizes trust in its own dialect. The promise of blockchain is not that it will rewrite their languages, but that it will translate certain sentences into a grammar the whole city can verify. At the end of this hallway is not a proclamation but a map. It shows where the ground is already solid and where the soil is wet and you will sink if you step without scaffolding. It shows paths from pilot to practice, from marketing deck to maintenance schedule. It shows the communities that must co-sign the journey: engineers, lawyers, designers, operators, auditors, and most of all, the people whose lives will run across the rails you lay. Will blockchain transform every industry? The honest answer is a careful one. It will transform every industry that cannot thrive without shared truth. It will quietly underpin many others without ever being noticed. And it will slide past the rest, leaving them to their crafts, their kitchens, their songs, which need no ledger to be art. We will, in time, follow the light into specific rooms, case studies that breathe, failures that teach, architectures that do not collapse when the wind rises. But for now, as you stand in the doorway of this house, hold two ideas at once. The dangerous allure of everything must be on-chain, and the equally dangerous dismissal that nothing here matters. Between them lies the careful work of transformation, the kind that starts not with slogans, but with a ledger that knocks, and a hand that knows when to open the door. Chapter 2. Blueprints, Bridges, and the Rooms that Open. The second knock is softer. It asks less about consequences in the abstract and more about the blueprints we will need if any transformation is to hold. A ledger, like a road, is not a plan, it is a surface. The plan lives in the routes we design and the rules we fix to the signposts. If Chapter 1 laid out the house, this chapter puts on a tool belt and starts measuring. Begin with a principle so practical it feels plain. Systems that survive are systems that someone can operate at 3 a.m. That includes blockchains. To answer whether blockchain will transform an industry, we must show how the transformation can be run by the tired, the busy, the fallible, without magic words. Blueprint 1. Anchors and arches. Treat the blockchain like granite at the foundation, not wallpaper on the walls. The chain is best where its properties, immutability, shared state, verifiable execution are structural. Everything else should be an arch that you can rebuild without moving the foundation. In practice, that means the sensitive, heavy data lives off-chain. In databases, secure clouds, private storages, distributed file systems, the chain stores commitments, hashes, proofs, pointers, small logic contracts that attest to the integrity of what sits elsewhere. If a shipping container's sensor produces a log of temperatures, it is the digest of that log that binds to the chain. If a clinical trial has a protocol, its version history is anchored by the chain while the documents remain where privacy and law demand. When we do this right, the ledger becomes the arbiter of what happened and when, without becoming the hoarder of everything. Why it matters. When a system fails, repair teams can patch an application, migrate a file store, or rotate keys without rewriting history. The chain remains steady ground. Industries do not fail from a single bad day. They fail when a system cannot be mended quickly. Anchors let us mend. Blueprint 2. Narrow interfaces, fat governance. Many pilots stumble because they are enthusiastic about code and shy about governance. They build fat interfaces, complicated smart contracts that do too much, and thin governance, a committee that does too little. Invert that. Make on-chain interfaces as narrow as possible. A handful of verified functions that do the minimum necessary and leave the rest to off-chain services that can evolve. Then build fat governance. Clear upgrade paths, roles for different participants, thresholds for decisions, emergency brakes that several parties must pull together, transparency about proposals and votes, dispute processes with timelines and evidence expectations. Here is a simple pattern for a consortium ledger in logistics. A contract that whitelists participants and their roles, shipper, carrier, port, inspector, a function to register a shipment identifier, and attach a Merkle root of its documents. A function to append a checkpoint with a timestamp and role-signed attestation. A function to resolve disputes by revealing specific leaves from the Merkle tree, proving a claim without dumping the entire dossier. A controlled upgrade mechanism that requires, say, 2/3 of ports, half of carriers by volume, and half of shippers by count to approve a change after a 7-day review period. That is not glamorous, but it is operable. When rules are codified and the path to changing them is publicly visible, the system gains a spine. Blueprint 3. Privacy without pretense. Transparency fuels trust. Secrecy protects dignity and strategy. The craft lies in selective disclosure, not maximal darkness or maximal light. Use 3 tools. First, data minimization. Only publish what must be common knowledge. A farmer ID can be a pseudonym. A lot number can be revealed without the farmer's full history. Second, zero-knowledge proofs and verifiable credentials. They allow a claim like, "This pallet's chain of custody is intact," or "This traveler is over 18," to be verified without exposing unrelated details. A school can issue a credential that asserts Alice is enrolled, which Alice can present to a transit system for a student discount without revealing her major, grades, or personal contact. A cold chain operator can prove that temperatures never exceeded a threshold by disclosing a succinct proof against a committed dataset anchored earlier. Third, separation of concerns. Use separate keys for identity, authorization, and transaction signing. Use separate chains or subnets or privacy layers where competitive data moves. Publish proofs to a public chain. Keep business logic on a permissioned ledger. Keep bulk data in storage under legal controls. This mosaic is messier than put it all on chain, but messier is safer for human life. Blueprint 4. User experience with a safety net. Your keys, your coins, is both empowering and cruel. If losing a phone can erase a small business's working capital, we have designed a cliff. Use multi-signature and social recovery by default. Let a business wallet require any 2 of a hardware key, a phone key, and a custodian key from a bank or fintech provider. Let the custodian be unable to move funds alone, but able to help recover access when devices fail. For individuals, allow guardians, trusted friends, institutions, or time-locked services to co-sign recovery ceremonies after a cooling period with transparent alerts. Bake in limits. Daily spend thresholds that can be raised slowly. Whitelists of safe counterparties. Delays on large transfers so a second pair of eyes can intervene. In an industry pilot, mandate sane defaults. No participant can deploy a contract without a designated upgrader's multisig. No treasury can route funds without time-delayed votes. No admin can act unilaterally. Every failure you prevent on day 1 is a headline you avoid on day 30. Blueprint 5. Interoperability as a first-class requirement. If you want an industry to adopt a chain, expect it to adopt 2, then 3. Expect partners to show up with different preferences and histories designed for that future now. Publish schemas for the data you commit and commit to those schemas with versioned IDs. Offer canonical bridges that move only proofs in minimal state, not the entire business logic. Prefer standards. For credentials, use widely accepted frameworks so a diploma issued in one ecosystem can be verified in another. For tokens, use conservative interfaces that wallets and auditors can interpret. Where possible, let assets be represented as claims rather than clones, pointers to an authoritative source with a proof trail, not duplicated balances that drift. Interoperability is politics in technical form. You are asking competitors to preserve optionality. If you can offer that without sacrificing integrity, you will have allies. Blueprint 6. Economics that survive winter. Every shared system must pay its bills. Blockchains are no exception. If an industry pilot depends on a speculative token price to sustain itself, you have built a kite for a storm. Design fees and incentives as if markets will be cold. If a network needs validators, pay them in fiat from consortium dues or in a stable asset whose value does not wobble with enthusiasm. If a token is necessary for spam prevention or resource metering, keep its supply predictable and its role narrow. Prefer boring finances, annual budget votes, transparent operating costs, reserve funds. Avoid protocols that turn governance into a casino. People will come for the jackpot and leave at the first hint of rain. A quiet example. A regional utility builds a local energy settlement chain. It sets validator rewards to match the utility's existing budget for billing operations, redirects savings from fewer disputes, and locks in 5-year funding from city partners. No token speculation, no bursts of number go up, just lower reconciliation costs year after year. 10 years later, no one gives keynotes about it. 10 years later, the lights still turn on. Blueprint 7. Compliance in the loop, not at the end. Industries are not waiting rooms outside a regulator's door. They are conversations with the regulator at the table. Invite them early. Show them the code. Write policies in prose and code in tandem. Example. A bank explores tokenized deposits. Its legal team collaborates with engineers to draft a convertibility contract that anyone can inspect. 1 unit on-chain is always redeemable for 1 unit in the bank account. Redemptions are subject to KYC, that is verifiably enforced at the edge. Attestations of reserves are published monthly by an auditor whose signature is cross-checked on-chain. Supervisors do not accept a PDF report alone. They simulate scenarios against a testnet. They ask for a circuit breaker. The bank adds one with a strict process and public notifications. The result is not perfect, but it is governable. Design compliance as code, where possible. Whitelists that are updated through accountable processes. Disclosure feeds that publish metrics, volumes, failures, dispute rates. Privacy safeguards that are demonstrable rather than claimed. You are not building to evade law. You are building to make compliance verifiable. Blueprint 8. Pathways. From pilot to production. The saddest graveyard in technology is the pilot program. To cross the gap, write the pathway before the first demo. Phase pilots by complexity and by surface area of change, not by flash. Start with the smallest process that delivers real value if made verifiable. A certificate of origin, a time-stamped inspection, a reconciliation of invoices for 1 lane. Prove that the new path reduces disputes or days sales outstanding. Publish metrics. Then, expand with intent. Each phase adds 1 new role, 1 new data type, or 1 new jurisdiction, not 5. Each phase has an explicit kill switch if the economics fail or the governance falters. Each phase includes training for operators, not just for architects. Each phase rotates the on-call duty among consortium members so that resilience culture grows evenly. By Phase 4, the ledger is a habit. By Phase 6, executives forget to talk about the chain. They talk about their faster closings, their lower fraud, their improved customer satisfaction scores. At that moment, transformation is not a headline, it is a quarterly report. Blueprints are necessary but not sufficient. We still need bridges, translations between how people work and how ledgers work. So let us cross a few. Bridge 1. From promise to proof. Industries often run on promises, service-level agreements, certifications, guarantees. We will not replace them with math, but we can attach proofs that change the posture from trust me to verify me, of fishery exports to markets that enforce sustainability rules. Today, a paper certificate says the catch came from approved zones. Tomorrow, a triangulation of satellite vessel data on boat sensor hashes and port inspections produce a rolling proof that regulators and buyers can check. The certificate still exists, but it is backed by evidence that no single party controls. Bridge 2. From secrecy to selective sharing. Business advantage often means holding cards close. Yet ecosystems grow when some data is common ground. The bridge is shared enough. Yes. A manufacturer shares quality metrics at the component level, but only as anonymized aggregates committed on-chain. Partners can see trends and trigger contracts if thresholds fail, but cannot reverse engineer trade secrets. A finance network publishes settlement times and failure rates, letting customers compare providers while keeping client-specific details private. The shared ledger holds the commitment. Dashboards derive insight without betraying advantage. Bridge 3. From top-down to multilateral. Central platforms are efficient when participants are homogeneous and aligned. Ecosystems are neither. A bridge here is to design so no one can change the rules alone and no one is left voiceless. Voting weights can balance volume and diversity. Large players cannot steamroll small players, yet freeloaders cannot veto progress. Time delays protect minorities. Public archives of debate prevent revisionist histories. The ledger is the minutes nobody can doctor. Now, the rooms that open the concrete vignettes where these blueprints and bridges make industry less brittle. Room, risk and credit for the uncounted. A small exporter's invoices are cryptographically signed by counterparties on a shared ledger. A local lender subscribes to a feed that proves which invoices are acknowledged, which are disputed, which are overdue. The bank's risk model improves. Fewer unknowns, fewer phone calls. Interest rates drop for those with transparent histories. Defaults fall as it becomes harder to double-pledge collateral. In the old world, creditworthiness was a story told by whoever had the best stationery. In the new, it is a graph of verifiable events. Room, recalls that end in hours. A medical device component fails in the field. Today's recall crawls through spreadsheets and phone trees. Tomorrow's recall queries a provenance index that maps serial numbers to assemblies, to hospitals, to patients, anchored by a ledger that carriers, manufacturers, and clinics jointly update. The hospital inventory system issues alerts in minutes. The manufacturer patches with surgical precision. Litigation shrinks. Lives are less exposed. Room, public procurement without shadow corners. A city publishes its tender process as a set of smart contracts. The request for proposals, the deadlines, the scoring rubric, the identities of committee members with privacy for preliminary scores, transparency for final awards. Every submission is hashed and time-stamped. Late submissions are rejected by code. Conflicts of interest are flagged when identities overlap with a public registry of affiliations. Citizens can see what was bought, when, and why. The ledger does not prevent corruption by decree. It narrows the corridors where corruption walks unnoticed. Room, creative royalties that actually show up. A composer licenses a track to 5 indie studios and 3 streaming platforms. Each license is a machine-readable contract anchored to the chain. When streams occur, usage reports are reconciled against committed logs. Disagreements trigger a dispute flow with evidence windows. Payment splits route in real time to band members' wallets, to managers, to session players with micro-royalties. A year later, nobody is hunting down pennies. Creativity pays, not paperwork. Room. Cross-border settlement without weekend silence. 2 banks on different continents use a shared settlement chain to net obligations. They do not move retail deposits to an unregulated token. They tokenize deposit claims under regulator-approved rules. FX pairs are cleared with transparent, auditable smart contracts. Liquidity buffers are visible to supervisors in near real time. Weekends no longer yawn like chasms. The chain is not faster than light. It is faster than waiting. Will blockchain transform every industry? The answer grows more grounded now. It will transform those parts of each industry where coordination is broken and where verified common ground unlocks value. It will skim beneath our lives like bedrock, invisible when it works, loud only when it fails. It will bypass rooms that do not need it. And because stories persuade better than diagrams, let us close with 2 last scenes, one of failure, one of persistence. Failure, honestly told. A consortium of luxury brands launches an authenticity chain. The press release is beautiful, but no brand wants to reveal its suppliers. The contract tries to serve competing masters, make provenance verifiable while keeping everything secret. The result is mush. An Oracle service signs, claims that nobody can audit. The public cannot verify certificates without trusting the brands they already had to trust. After a year, the pilot dies. The lesson: a ledger cannot conjure agreement where incentives are misaligned. If the story is, trust us, but now with extra steps, the audience leaves. Persistence, quietly told. A mid-sized port and its surrounding ecosystem digitize their gate operations. Carriers, drayage companies, customs brokers, and inspectors agree on a tiny set of events they will record together. Arrival requests, slot assignments, gate entries, holds, releases. Disputes between drivers and the port drop by half because records are unambiguous. Dwell times fall. Over 2 years, neighboring ports adopt the schema. Without slogans, a standard emerges. The chain did not change the nature of ships. It changed the nature of waiting. We circle back to the original question, now with hands dusty from work. Will blockchain transform every industry? It is almost the wrong question, like asking if electricity transformed every industry or if standardized shipping containers transformed every industry. These were not decorations. They were substrates. They did not make soup taste better, but they changed where soup could be shipped, how long it kept, what a restaurant could offer. They did not write novels, but they changed how publishing reached cities and villages. Their transformations were uneven, sometimes delayed, often invisible, and finally undeniable. So, too, with a ledger that is owned by no one and checked by everyone, where industries share truth awkwardly, watch for change. Where provenance is value, watch for change. Where governance can be made legible, watch for change. Where none of these are true, let the craft stay what it is. If you build, build with humility, anchors for integrity, arches for flexibility, narrow interfaces, fat governance, privacy that proves more than it hides, safety nets for ordinary hands, bridges to other ecosystems, economics that outlast excitement, compliance in the room from the start, pathways that teach with each phase. If you invest in those who understand that ledgers do not save us from ourselves. They give us new ways to keep promises. Look for teams who talk more about negotiations than about mints, who have a migration plan for the day their first design is wrong, who see regulators as partners in the social contract rather than as antagonists to outwit. If you're the skeptic who has seen cycles rise and crash, keep your skepticism but not your cynicism. Ask for measurable deltas. Fewer disputes, fewer days to settle, fewer errors to reconcile, fewer hands needed to transcribe a truth that should never have been typed twice. If you are offered only tokens and not metrics, keep your wallet closed. And if you are the believer who hears the knock like a prophecy, temper your faith with patience. Most industries do not flip, they bend. You will find joy not in the overnight revolution, but in the morning, after a tough deployment, when a dispatcher finishes a shift without cursing at a spreadsheet. You will find proof not in an influencer's thread, but in a procurement officer's boredom, because the process worked and there is nothing left to fix today. The transformation worth wanting is the one that turns yesterday's anxious phone call into tomorrow's quiet ledger entry. It is the transformation that lets competitors coordinate without capitulating to a single master. It is the transformation that replaces a "we promise" with a "we proved," and not for spectacle, but for sanity. When you hear the knock again at your port, your clinic, your studio, your bank, remember that you are not obliged to open every door. But somewhere in your corridors there is a room where people spend their days reconciling versions of truth that should be one. If you can find that room and lay a shared ledger beneath it, not to worship but to work upon, then yes, there, blockchain will transform your industry. Not everywhere, not all at once, but exactly where the floor beneath you has begged for years to become solid